Ever wondered what causes shingles? It's a common question, and today we'll dive into this enigma. Shingles, a term that sends a shiver down the spine for some, is a medical condition that's more than just a mysterious name. It's actually caused by a virus, a tiny microbe with a big impact. The culprit behind shingles is none other than the varicella-zoster virus, a double agent of sorts, responsible for both chickenpox and shingles. Now you might be wondering, how can the same virus cause two different conditions? Well, it's a fascinating tale of dormancy and reactivation. After a bout of chickenpox, instead of leaving your body, the varicella-zoster virus decides to stick around. It takes up residence in the nerve cells, lying low, inactive but not gone. For many years, this virus can remain dormant, causing no problems at all. But under certain circumstances, it can make a comeback, waking up from its slumber. And when it does, it doesn't cause chickenpox again. Instead, it manifests as shingles, a completely different condition. So, what triggers this reactivation? There are several potential culprits. It could be stress, illness, or a weakened immune system. It could be due to the advancing years or even physical trauma. Sometimes it happens after treatments like radiotherapy, and sometimes it occurs for no discernible reason at all. Here's an important note. You can't catch shingles from someone who has it. However, you can get chickenpox from someone with shingles if you've never had chickenpox or haven't been vaccinated against it. The virus spreads when you come into contact with the fluid from the blisters of someone with shingles, or by touching their bedding, clothing, or towels. Unlike its cousin chickenpox, the shingles virus doesn't usually spread through coughing or sneezing. Covering the shingles blisters with a dressing can help reduce the risk of passing the virus to others. Once the blisters crust over, the person is no longer infectious. So shingles is essentially a reactivation of the chickenpox virus. But what triggers this reactivation? The varicella-zoster virus doesn't leave your body after chickenpox. Instead, it stays dormant in your nerve cells. Imagine it like a quiet roommate, tucked away in the corner, not causing any trouble, until they do. This is where the shingles story begins. The virus that gave you chickenpox as a child is not truly gone. It's just sleeping, lying in wait within the nerve cells, biding its time. And when it wakes up, it manifests as shingles. So what rouses this sleeping beast? Well, that's a great question with a somewhat elusive answer. The virus may be reactivated by a number of factors. These can include stress, illness, a weakened immune system, or even aging. Trauma and radiotherapy are also on the list of potential triggers. But here's the kicker. Sometimes shingles just occurs, and we don't know why. It's like the virus decides to throw a surprise party, and your body is the unfortunate venue. There's no invitation, no prior warning, just a sudden, painful rash that's a telltale sign of shingles. But before we dive further into the symptoms and effects of shingles, let's take a moment to clarify something important. The varicella-zoster virus can only cause shingles if you've had chickenpox before. That's right, chickenpox is the opening act for shingles. If you've never had chickenpox or the chickenpox vaccine, you can't just get shingles. You'd first have to contract chickenpox, and then maybe, just maybe, the virus might decide to wake up later on and cause shingles. However, it's not all doom and gloom. The good news is that shingles is not as contagious as chickenpox. You can't catch shingles from someone who has it, but you can get chickenpox from someone with shingles if you've never had it before. While we can't always pinpoint why the virus reactivates, we do know that it can't turn into shingles without first causing chickenpox. So let's keep exploring this fascinating world of shingles in our next scene, the shingles transmission. Now you might be wondering, can I get shingles from someone else who has it? Well, let's dive into that, shall we? Shingles itself is not contagious. Yes, you heard it right. If you're in the same room with someone who has shingles, you won't suddenly break out in a painful rash. However, there's a bit more to the story than that, and it involves our old friend, the varicella-zoster virus. This is the same virus that causes chickenpox. When someone contracts chickenpox, the virus doesn't just disappear after the illness runs its course. Instead, it retreats into the nerve cells where it lies dormant, often for many years. Sometimes, though, the virus wakes up, and when it does, it can cause shingles. But here's where things get a bit tricky. While you can't catch shingles from someone who has it, the virus that causes shingles can be spread to people who haven't had chickenpox or the chickenpox vaccine. This usually happens through direct contact with the open sores of the shingles rash. Once infected, the person will develop chickenpox, not shingles. So, how does this happen? Shingles is typically characterized by a painful rash that develops on one side of the face or body, The rash forms blisters that typically scab over in 7 to 10 days and clears up within 2 to 4 weeks. Before the rash develops, there is often pain, itching, or tingling in the area where the rash will develop. If you come into contact with the fluid from these blisters before they crust over, you could potentially contract the virus if you've never had chickenpox or the vaccine. It's important, however, to note that the shingles virus doesn't usually spread through airborne transmission, like a cough or a sneeze. Instead, it's about direct contact. That's why it's recommended to keep the rash covered and avoid contact with others until the blisters have crusted over. So, while you can't catch shingles from someone, you can get chickenpox from them if you've never had it or the vaccine. So, if you or someone else has shingles, how can you prevent the virus from spreading? This is a question we often encounter, and it's an important one. Shingles is caused by the reactivation of the varicella-zoster virus, the same culprit behind chickenpox. While you can't catch shingles from someone else, you can get chickenpox if you've never had it before or haven't been vaccinated against it. So how do we prevent this from happening? Firstly, it's crucial to understand that the virus is spread through direct contact with the fluid from the shingles blisters. If you touch these blisters or anything that has come in contact with them, like bedding, clothing, or towels, you're at risk of contracting chickenpox. So if you're caring for someone with shingles or have it yourself, it's vital to avoid contact with these blisters. This might mean not sharing towels or bed linens and definitely not touching the blisters directly. If you have to interact with the person, make sure to wash your hands thoroughly afterward. Another method of preventing the spread is by covering the blisters with a dressing. This helps to contain the fluid and prevent it from reaching others. Remember, the key is to minimize exposure to the fluid from the blisters. One common misconception is that shingles can be spread through coughing or sneezing, much like a cold or flu. But this is not usually the case. The varicella-zoster virus prefers direct contact, and the chance of it spreading through the air is relatively low. Lastly, it's worth noting that once the blisters crust over, the person is no longer infectious. This is usually a sign that the worst is over and the person is on the road to recovery. So prevention really comes down to understanding how the virus spreads and taking steps to avoid that. It's about being mindful of contact and practicing good hygiene to protect yourself and others. Once the blisters crust over, the person is no longer infectious. But until that point, it's essential to be vigilant and take precautions to prevent the spread of this virus. So, we've talked about what shingles are, how the virus reactivates, and how to prevent its spread. We've delved into the mystery of shingles, a condition that's caused by the reactivation of the varicella-zoster virus, the same culprit behind chickenpox. This virus, having lain dormant in the nerve cells of the body, can wake up years later, causing the painful rash known as shingles. Factors such as stress, illness, immunosuppression, older age, trauma, and radiotherapy can trigger this reactivation, although it can also happen without any apparent reason. We've also explored how shingles cannot be caught from someone who has it. However, a person who has never had chickenpox or the chickenpox vaccine can get chickenpox from someone with shingles. This transmission occurs through contact with fluid from the blisters on the skin of the person with shingles or through using or touching their bedding, clothing, or towels. Contrary to chickenpox, the shingles virus does not usually spread by coughing and sneezing, making it a bit more elusive. Then, we moved on to discussing how to prevent the spread of the virus. Covering the shingles blisters with a dressing can help reduce the risk of passing the virus to others. Once the blisters crust over, the person is no longer infectious, making it a safer environment for those around them. In the quest to understand shingles, we must remember that these are general guidelines and each individual's experience may vary. If you suspect you have shingles, it's important to consult a healthcare professional. They can provide a definitive diagnosis and guide you through the treatment options available. Don't hesitate to seek help, as early treatment can help lessen the severity of the condition and reduce the risk of complications. Knowledge, as always, is power. The more we understand about conditions like shingles, the better equipped we are to manage our health and well-being. And that's a wrap on shingles. Remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to your health.